"You're fired, Kayla. Leave your coat and badge now." The sound of the shouting echoed like a slap in the sterile, silent air of the St. Bradford Hospital's main lobby. The entire area seemed to freeze in time. From the patients waiting to be seen, to the medical staff stepping out of the emergency room, everyone turned their heads toward the source of that voice. In the midst of the astonished gazes and hushed whispers, Kayla Thompson, a 22-year-old black intern nurse and the only one in the hospital's demanding residency program, stood frozen. Her face still held the traces of exhaustion from her overnight shift, but her eyes were vacant, not from fear, but from disbelief at the scene unfolding in front of her. In front of her stood Harold Whitmore, the hospital's CEO, a tall white man with slicked-back gray hair and glasses that never left his nose. He stared at her as if she were his mortal enemy. His face turned crimson, not from genuine anger, but as if he were putting on a display of power for the crowd that had gathered. "Gross violation of hospital policy," he snapped, his arm pointing at her like a prosecutor in a courtroom. "Using medical resources without authorization, without orders, without confirmation. And for who? A nameless beggar, uninsured, undocumented, who can't even pay." The air in the lobby felt thick. The sound of every heartbeat rang loudly in the silence. Even the sound of the pharmacy cart's wheels came to a stop. In the distance, Tiffany Blake, the night receptionist, sneaked a victorious smile from behind the front desk. Kayla didn't respond. She didn't bow her head. She didn't beg. She simply stood there, silently, like someone stripped of everything for doing the right thing. Her lashes fluttered down slightly, hiding the deep, boiling emotions in her dark eyes that she had to suppress. Kayla, the same girl who had been honored as the state's top nursing student, the one who, just last year, had been praised by the chief of emergency medicine for saving a rare heart attack victim. Now, she was being smeared as if she were a criminal, simply for daring to go beyond the heartless rules. Whitmore took a step closer, his voice dripping with discrimination. "People like you need to learn their place." Each word cut into her like a knife. This wasn't just about what happened last night. It was about her skin color, her status, her background, and the courage he couldn't believe a black girl like her could possibly have. Kayla clenched her fists. Then, slowly, she removed her pristine white coat, the one she had worn with pride, once seeing it as a symbol of her dream to save lives, and placed it on the reception desk. Next, she took off her ID badge, K. Thompson, RN intern, and carefully placed it on top of the coat. "I saved a life," she said, her voice calm but cold. "If I have to pay for that, then I'm ready." Whitmore laughed loudly, the sound cutting through the silence of the lobby. "You saved nobody, just a dead beggar, and you've just destroyed your own future." At that moment, 2 security guards approached. One of them, Jordan Wells, who had once greeted her every morning with a smile. But today, Jordan only bowed his head, not daring to meet her gaze as he extended his hand to escort her out like a criminal. Kayla walked on. Amidst dozens of whispered glances, some filled with pity, others with derision, no one spoke out. No one stood up, no one resisted. The young, thin girl, her small shoulders trembling slightly under her thin hoodie, walked with quiet dignity. But each step she took echoed like a drumbeat in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. As she pushed open the revolving glass door, Kayla paused for a brief moment. Her eyes caught a familiar corner of the street, where a homeless man used to sit, almost becoming the hospital's shadow. But today, that spot was empty. Instead, there was a man in a tailored gray suit, wearing sunglasses, speaking on the latest smartphone. Kayla didn't know what she was seeing, but her heart skipped a beat. A strange sense of foreboding crept over her skin. She had broken the rules to save a life, but perhaps that person would change the rules entirely. The cold wind from that night still lingered in Kayla's mind as she walked out of the hospital the next morning, humiliated, fired. But if she could go back in time to 11 p.m. the previous night, even just once more, she would do the same thing. Because what happened that night wasn't just an emergency, it was a choice between conscience and rules, and she had made the right one, even if the price was everything. St. Bradford Hospital during the night shift was as quiet as any other high-end private hospital. Bright hallways, spotless floors, and the sound of the vital signs monitor ticking slowly, like a clock counting time. Kayla, the youngest intern nurse of the shift, was about to finish up the last patient's file when a soft beep from the front door echoed through the room. The automatic glass doors opened, and in that brief moment, the entire emergency area felt as though it was torn apart by a figure slumping through the threshold. A man, his face smeared with blood, his shirt torn and covered in mud, his hands trembling as if they had no strength left. He staggered 2 more steps before collapsing onto the shiny tile floor, his head hitting the edge of the waiting table. Blood spread across the white floor like a streak of fresh red paint. "Please, help," were the only words he managed to utter before losing consciousness. Behind the reception desk, Tiffany Blake, the night shift receptionist, looked up from her phone, clicking her tongue as if she'd been disturbed by an interesting text message. Her long, red nails clicked on the desk. No ID, no credit card, no treatment. Those are the rules. Then she returned to her phone, chewing gum while liking bikini photos on Instagram. Kayla stood frozen for a few seconds. No one else moved. She looked around. 2 other night nurses, one printing papers, the other eating instant noodles. Everyone saw it. No one reacted. But her heart was pounding. Weak pulse, rapid breathing, sluggish pupil response. Her brain immediately started processing. Head trauma, possibly internal bleeding. If not treated in 3 minutes, he could die. Without thinking, Kayla rushed forward. She kneeled, placing 2 fingers on the man's carotid artery, the pulse faint, almost gone. She unbuckled his belt to check his abdomen and discovered a deep bruise, a concealed wound. The smell of blood mixed with street dust hit her nose. "Call Dr. Martinez. Prepare ER Room 3. Unlock the neuroscope," she shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" Tiffany tossed her hair back, standing up from her chair, eyes wide. "You don't touch him without authorization. That's against protocol." Kayla didn't answer. Her hands had already started compressing the man's chest. Each compression brought blood pouring from his mouth, a bad sign. She turned her head. "Nurse Naomi, help me with the IV. Open his airway." Naomi hesitated, then stepped forward, glancing cautiously at Tiffany. "I don't want to get reported." Kayla looked up, her voice sharp as a knife. "Then let me do it alone. But if he dies, it will be all our fault." Her words choked the air in the room. Naomi nodded. When Dr. Luis Martinez arrived, he immediately understood what was happening. No questions, no doubts. He signaled for support. The entire ER suddenly moved like a living machine. Stretchers were rolled in. The ECG screen lit up. The ventilator was connected. Meanwhile, Tiffany Blake stood still behind the desk, arms crossed, glaring at Kayla as if she were a criminal, not the person who had just pulled someone from the clutches of death. 45 minutes later, the man was transferred to the ICU in critical but stable condition. Blood had been transfused, his head injury treated. Martinez had intubated him. Kayla, her white coat soaked with blood, hair tangled, sat on the chair like she had just stepped out of a battlefield. None of the executives were present that night. No one signed any permission forms. But she had saved a life. When she left the hospital early in the morning, she didn't know the man's name. She didn't know his identity, and she didn't need to. To Kayla, a life wasn't valued by insurance cards or titles. She only knew she had done the right thing. But she also knew, in Whitmore and Tiffany's eyes, right or wrong didn't matter as much as who was doing it, and Kayla, the young black girl from the southern side of the city, was never meant to be a hero in a system built to crush people like her. Kayla left the emergency room around 4 a.m. after more than 3 hours of relentless fighting. Her face still bore the remnants of dried blood. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the final nursing report for the shift, silently hoping that the nameless patient would pull through. No one asked her a word. No one thanked her. And more importantly, no one had warned her that this morning's dawn would mark the beginning of a public execution. 7 a.m. The main lobby of St. Bradford Hospital was already bustling. As soon as Kayla walked through the door, she heard a familiar voice shouting, "Miss Thompson, front and center now!" Harold Whitmore, the CEO, stood right in the middle of the lobby, his shirt sleeves neatly rolled up, his red tie tightened like he was preparing for a trial rather than a routine administrative matter. Behind him was Tiffany Blake, who still hadn't left her shift, arms crossed, smirking as though she had just watched an entertaining show. Before Kayla could process what was happening, she noticed a security guard, Paul, tall, white, standing behind her as if to block her. Another guard, Jordan Wells, stepped forward, but didn't make eye contact with her. Whitmore didn't give her a chance to speak. "You are suspended immediately for a serious violation of patient protocol. No authorization, no permission, no executive approval. You used hospital resources for an unidentified, uninsured person without paperwork." His voice echoed across the lobby. A few nurses passing by stopped in their tracks. Some patients turned their heads to look. An elderly woman in a wheelchair exclaimed, "Oh my God, they're firing that girl?" Whitmore turned to the crowd, not hiding his intention to humiliate Kayla in front of all the staff and patients. "Listen closely. St. Bradford Hospital is not a charity station. We have rules, we have systems, and those who break them will pay the price." Kayla swallowed hard. Her hand clenched the strap of her backpack behind her, but she didn't look down. "I saved a dying person. I did what a nurse is supposed to do. If I have to be fired for not standing by while someone dies, then I accept that." Whitmore laughed, a dry, mocking sound. "Who do you think you are? A black intern from poor Riverside trying to redefine our medical ethics. Are you blind to the law or blind to reality?" He then turned to Paul. "Take her ID, take her coat, get her out of here." Kayla removed her white coat, the same coat she had worn with so much pride when she was accepted into St. Bradford. She folded it carefully and placed it on the reception desk, along with her ID badge. No one intervened, no one spoke up. She had expected at least Dr. Martinez to say something, but he wasn't there. Or perhaps he was, but kept in a meeting to prevent an internal outburst. Paul patted her shoulder, not roughly, but not kindly either. "Please leave." Jordan silently followed behind. But his eyes still held a trace of embarrassment, as if he carried the shame of those who chose silence. The revolving door pushed Kayla out, as if it were pushing her out of a world she had once believed she belonged to. She stood for a moment at the bottom of the steps, not knowing where to go or what to do. The sun was rising higher, casting light on the wealthy neighborhood where the hospital was located. Marble shops, expensive cars, and people in suits walking briskly as though they were saving the world each morning. Then she glanced across the street, to the corner where, for over 2 years, a homeless man had sat hunched over, hiding his face beneath the frayed coat, asking for spare change. But today the corner was empty. The man was gone. In his place, a man in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, wearing a gold watch and holding a handmade Vertu phone worth tens of thousands of dollars, was speaking in a deep, concise tone, each word carrying the decisiveness of someone accustomed to issuing commands. He glanced toward the hospital. Then he looked at Kayla. A brief glance, but deep, as though he recognized her. Kayla felt her heart skip a beat. Something was off, or rather, something was about to be uncovered, and she, the one just fired for doing the right thing, could very well be the focal point of an earthquake the hospital had never anticipated. Kayla stood silently, watching the man across the street until he turned away and stepped into a shiny black Range Rover parked nearby. The car glided away smoothly, as if it had never been in this poor neighborhood. But that moment planted an indescribable feeling in Kayla's heart, as though the connection between her and the events of the previous night hadn't ended, but was only just beginning. Kayla's apartment was in an old building at the end of a crumbling row of houses by the river, where the wind howled through gaps in the wooden doors, and the sounds of car horns mixed with constant arguments. She had lived alone since she was 19, after her mother died of cancer without insurance for timely treatment. That memory had led her into the medical field, not for the salary, but for the oath to save lives. She opened the door, set her bag down on the table, and intended to make a cup of hot coffee to wake herself up after the hellish morning when her phone buzzed. 4 missed calls, all from the same unfamiliar number with a Manhattan area code. She squinted at the screen, her heart sinking. Before she could even check, a 5th call came through. She hesitated, then hit the answer button. "Miss Kayla Thompson?" The voice was male, clear, polite, with the kind of pronunciation that sounded like it had just come from a Wall Street boardroom. "I'm Elijah Reynolds, senior partner at Reynolds and Rayner LLP. We need to speak urgently about the person you saved last night." Kayla was stunned. She stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at the empty alley below. "The person I saved? Are you his lawyer?" A brief silence. Then Reynolds' voice deepened. "We represent Mr. Vincent Langston, and yes, he is the one you saved. But this matter is not just about medical care. The events of last night could bring down an entire system that's been corrupt for a long time. Mr. Langston wants to meet you, immediately." Kayla fell silent. Vincent Langston? That name was not unfamiliar. The CEO of Langston Medical Group, the largest private healthcare corporation on the East Coast, with dozens of hospitals, clinics, and a private insurance network catering to the ultra-wealthy. She sat on the edge of the chair, her heart racing. She quietly wondered, could this be a trap, or the consequence of her illegal act of emergency care last night? If this is about preparing for a lawsuit, I'm willing to cooperate, but I only did what my conscience told me. Kayla stammered. Reynolds interrupted, his tone gentle yet firm. "No, Miss Thompson. No one is suing you. On the contrary, you are about to become the center of a major change. We need you at our office within an hour. The address will be sent to you." Then his voice lowered, almost whispering through the phone. "And remember this, Kayla. What you didn't just save one man. It may have started the collapse of an entire healthcare structure full of injustice and discrimination." Exactly 1 hour later, Kayla arrived at a high-end coffee shop in a glass building in the financial district. She was still in her jeans and dark t-shirt, feeling out of place among those in suits and shiny leather shoes. A black man, around 40 years old, dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit and a navy tie, stood up from a corner table and waved. This was Elijah Reynolds. He looked sharp, with a determined gaze, and every step he took exuded the poise of a top-tier lawyer. "Miss Kayla, I know today has been a very hard day for you, but what you're about to hear could change the entire course of your future, and perhaps even the future of the United States." He placed an iPad in front of her. Kayla glanced at the screen, and her heart nearly stopped. On it was a picture of the man she had helped last night, but this time he was wearing a suit, standing with the president during an award ceremony in Washington. Below was the caption, "Vincent Langston, CEO, Langston Medical Group." Kayla looked up, stammering, Is that him?" Reynolds nodded, his voice now deeper. "Vincent has a habit of meditating and walking alone each month to reconnect with reality. No bodyguards, no escorts. Last night he had an accident when he slipped on a mountain road, and if it weren't for you, he would have died before he reached another hospital." Kayla stared at the screen, remembering the man's panicked eyes as he collapsed in the pool of blood. At that time, he had only whispered, "Please, help." She hadn't known his name, she hadn't known his identity. She only knew she couldn't stand by and watch him die. Reynolds pulled a file from his briefcase. But the issue isn't just that he survived. Vincent has recounted everything, being left in the lobby, denied care because he didn't have paperwork. And about you, the only one who dared to break the rules to save him. And what about Whitmore? He closed the file, his gaze sharp. Defamation, termination, public humiliation. Kayla froze. She had never imagined her actions would be witnessed, let alone remembered by someone as influential as Vincent Langston. Reynolds emphasized, "You are about to become the first witness. But before we go any further, you need to decide. Are you ready to overturn the entire system that crushed you this morning?" Kayla looked out the window, where the sunlight reflected off the glass of the skyscrapers. She clenched her fist, remembering Whitmore's contemptuous stare, Tiffany's triumphant laugh, and the feeling of being dragged out like a criminal. "I don't want revenge," she said slowly. "I just want justice, for myself, for the patients who've been abandoned like my mother, and for anyone who has ever been turned away just because they didn't have the right kind of insurance card." Kayla sat motionless, the light from the iPad reflecting off her face, a face still marked by the fatigue of a sleepless night, the humiliation of a morning of disgrace, and now, the realization that she had unknowingly saved one of the most powerful figures in the U.S. healthcare industry. On the screen was a picture of Vincent Langston, the founder and CEO of Langston Medical Group, a multi-billion-dollar company that owned a network of hospitals, health insurance companies, and research investment funds. In the press photo, Vincent wore a navy blue suit, standing next to the president at a national healthcare event, his face serious but his eyes contemplative, showing the wisdom of someone who had seen it all. Kayla swallowed hard. She couldn't believe the man covered in blood, trembling, whispering, "Please, help." In her hands that night was Vincent Langston. He was right there, lying on the floor, with no one helping. They were going to let him die, she whispered as if speaking to herself. Elijah Reynolds nodded, his eyes never leaving Kayla. Exactly. No one recognized him. No ID, no insurance, no wallet, nothing to prove his identity. But one person didn't need that, and that was you. Reynolds pulled the tablet toward him, scrolling quickly a few times before stopping at a security camera footage clip. In the video, Kayla was kneeling beside Vincent, at that point just the nameless man, performing chest compressions, shouting for help, her face covered in blood, but her eyes shining with determination. The screen then shifted to a clip of Tiffany Blake refusing to help, shaking her head, then sitting down and resuming playing on her phone. "The entire night was recorded," Reynolds said, "and we backed it up before Whitmore could delete the system." Kayla looked up. Did he know? No, Reynolds shook his head, but he will. Very soon. He handed her a thin document. Inside were statistics that made Kayla's skin crawl. In the past 5 years, 89% of Black and Latino patients without premium insurance had been denied admission at St. Bradford. During the same period, large donations had been funneled into Mayor Eric Whitmore's re-election campaign. Whitmore's cousin, Harold Whitmore, the hospital director. Patients who were denied care were often not officially documented, to avoid affecting the efficiency ratings. And most notably, Reynolds continued, his voice lowering, were at least 14 cases of deaths due to delayed treatment. All of them Black or undocumented immigrants. Kayla felt her entire body freeze. She gripped the armrest of the chair. So, those people died simply because they weren't worthy enough to be helped? Reynolds fell silent. He didn't need to answer. The data spoke for him. When Vincent Langston woke up the next morning, in a luxury hospital owned by his own company, the first person he requested to contact wasn't his personal doctor, nor the board of directors, but a lawyer specializing in investigating abuse of power within the healthcare system. Reynolds himself. Vincent recounted in detail how he had been abandoned, how Tiffany had not moved, how the entire reception desk had been indifferent, and about the young girl who had rushed to save him, not knowing who he was, a Black intern that system had always sought to suppress. "We want you to be the center of a campaign to overturn the entire system of discrimination in elite healthcare," Reynolds said, his voice firm. "But to do that, we need you to be ready to face the backlash, the media storm, and even the risk of being slandered and isolated." Kayla sat in silence. She remembered the image of her mother, who died without receiving treatment because she lacked insurance. She thought of the Black patients in the poor neighborhood she had met, sent away because there were no beds. And she recalled the contemptuous look from Whitmore this morning, as if she didn't have the right to exist there. "I'm not doing this to get famous," Kayla said, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm doing it so people like my mother don't die because they don't have insurance." Reynolds nodded. "Then get ready. The fight starts today." As Kayla left the coffee shop with a determined expression and classified documents in hand, on the other side of the city, in the 7th floor office of St. Bradford Hospital, Harold Whitmore was pacing, as if the world still revolved around him. Little did he know, every action and every word of his from yesterday until now had been recorded, and the fuse was the very girl he had pushed down into the dirt this morning. 9 a.m. Whitmore called an emergency internal meeting. In the main conference room, where the walls were adorned with awards, accolades, and photos of him cutting ribbons with the mayor, over 30 people sat around the gleaming walnut table. No one dared speak. They all knew. Whitmore's post-incident meetings weren't about finding solutions, but about sending a message. He stood in the middle of the room, his hands resting on the table, his eyes sweeping over the crowd before announcing in his usual even but threatening tone, "Intern Kayla Thompson has been terminated. She violated hospital protocol severely, treating a patient without records, without insurance, without authorization." He paused, his gaze locking on Doctor Luis Martinez, who had just entered, still wearing his lab coat. Martinez, the Mexican-American doctor who had been on night shift and had helped Kayla save the nameless patient. Whitmore looked at him coldly and said, "I hope this is the last time any of you let emotions get in the way of procedure. Here, we don't act on instinct. We act according to the system." The air was thick with tension. Tiffany Blake, sitting at the far end, flashed a satisfied smile, as if she had just been awarded a medal. She nodded slightly, chewing on her pen like she was savoring her victory. Dr. Martinez said nothing, but under the table his hands tightened into fists. In his eyes there was no fear, but a silence waiting to explode. Whitmore stepped up to the projector. He clicked the remote. The large screen displayed charts of revenue, patient acceptance rates, and most notably the latest quarter's profits, up 14.8%. Here, he pointed to the chart, is the result of discipline, proof of eliminating the disruptive elements. We cannot let an intern upset the system just because of a moment of weakness. The room was silent. A few nodded, either in agreement or from fear of opposing him. Whitmore sneered and concluded with a line no one would forget. At St. Bradford, kindness is not placed above profit. Remember that. But while he arrogantly believed he had restored order on the ground floor, Jordan Wells, the head of security overseeing the surveillance system, sat in the camera room with an unusual expression. His hand rested on the keyboard, the screen in front of him showing a list of internal security footage, and notably the original audio file, a system upgrade made 2 months ago to capture sound as well. In the recording from the night after Kayla saved the patient, Whitmore could be heard clearly at the reception desk. "That arrogant little black girl needed a reason to get fired, and she just gave me the perfect one." Jordan closed his eyes and sighed. He thought of his mother, a nurse who had been fired for daring to accuse a superior of discrimination at another hospital. He knew that feeling. He knew that helplessness. He opened his personal email, typed, "Elijah, I'm the one responsible for the monitoring system at Bradford. I have what you want. Send." That evening, in his penthouse apartment, Whitmore poured himself a glass of red wine, turned on jazz music, and sank into his armchair. He thought everything was done. Discipline had been restored. A useless pawn had been eliminated, and the system would continue to profit. What he didn't know was that just a few blocks away, Vincent Langston, the man he'd once called a homeless bum, was sitting in a conference room with investigators, lawyers, and a team of data analysts combing through security footage. "I want to know everything about Harold Whitmore," Vincent ordered. "I want to know who's been denied treatment. I want to know what Tiffany Blake has posted, and I want a list of every single money transfer from Bradford to the mayor's office in the last 5 years." A nervous assistant asked, "Would you like to keep this confidential, sir?" Vincent looked them straight in the eyes. Number I want everything to be broadcast live. When the villain sleeps soundly on his throne, it is then that the storm quietly approaches from the people who were once despised. And Whitmore, who believed power was eternal, did not know that the heel he had just stepped on, crushing Kayla Thompson, had landed squarely on the fuse. Whitmore thought he had locked the door on the scandal that morning, unaware that another door, bigger, deeper, and more dangerous, was silently opening behind him. From a glass building less than 2 blocks from St. Bradford Hospital, Vincent Langston stood by the window on the 28th floor, arms crossed, eyes gazing down at the bustling street. But in his mind, he no longer saw the hospital or the street. He saw Kayla's face, bloodied, panicked, yet resolute, as she performed chest compressions to save him without knowing who he was. A person like her, if cast out from the medical field simply for doing what was right, meant the entire system was sick, and this illness needed to be surgically excised at the root. That same day, Langston didn't just call a meeting. He assembled a private investigative team, including lawyers, data analysts, former medical inspectors, and a cybersecurity expert who had worked for the government. I want every piece of evidence regarding the exclusion of Black patients, every denial of treatment, every missing patient file. I want to review St. Bradford's internal finances for the past 5 years. And I want to know, where did the money go and what did it buy? Vincent's voice was calm, but each sentence was an order. 3 days later, the numbers began to appear on the projector screen in the meeting room. 89% of Black and Latino patients without premium insurance were denied admission, even in critical conditions. Over 300 emergency cases had been marked as ineligible for admission without medical justification. In the last 5 years, after each budget restructuring at the hospital, a large donation had been funneled into Mayor Eric Whitmore's re-election campaign, Harold Whitmore's cousin. The total amounted to over $2.3 million. This isn't just discrimination, one investigator said. This is a modern healthcare apartheid system, operating by concealing data and draining the poor to feed political power. Vincent stared at the statistics, his eyes cold and sharp. We won't fire the first shot, but let's make sure the guns are always loaded. Meanwhile, in another corner, Jordan Wells, the head of security, who had silently bowed his head when Kayla was fired, was going through the internal audio and camera footage. He discovered not only the clip of Whitmore insulting Kayla, there was also a clip of Tiffany Blake saying in the break room, "That little girl only knows how to act like a hero to save poor people in order to get promoted." And another clip, the hospital's finance chief boasting about how he cut $500,000 in healthcare costs by eliminating unprofitable patients. Jordan printed everything, placed it in an envelope marked Priority Legal Review, and sent it to Elijah Reynolds with a message. "I've been silent long enough. Now I'm standing on the right side." On the other side, Luis Martinez, the emergency doctor who had assisted Kayla that night, was also going through a fierce internal struggle. He had once wanted to remain silent, but when he saw Kayla being dragged away like a criminal, he felt like a coward. Now, when asked, he simply said, "I'm a doctor. I cannot stand by while a life is treated like a financial statistic." Martinez contacted Vincent Langston and volunteered to be an internal witness. By now, Vincent was no longer the victim, but the commander. He drafted a dual-approach justice campaign, a legal attack with concrete evidence, based on internal emails, financial records, and statistical discrimination. A public image strike, releasing the video footage from the cameras, the discriminatory language, and the angle showing Kayla desperately trying to save him amidst the hospital's indifference. Reynolds only asked, "Are you sure you want to make this public? It will shake the entire healthcare industry." Langston replied without hesitation, "If an industry is shaken just because one nurse saved a life, then that industry deserves to be shaken." Tiffany Blake, who had been boasting about getting rid of the annoying girl, still had no idea that all the social media records, internal messages, and breakroom camera footage were being backed up, organized into a tightly constructed data system. Meanwhile, Whitmore, lost in charity galas, handshakes with the mayor and investors, still believed he had eradicated the problem at its root. What he didn't know was that the seed he had crushed into the ground was Kayla, and the ground was now cracking wide open. Under the dim yellow office lamp, while Vincent Langston's investigative team worked tirelessly to gather evidence elsewhere, those who had once applauded Kayla's departure from St. Bradford began talking too much, and at the wrong moment. Tuesday afternoon. Tiffany Blake, the receptionist who had coldly refused a dying patient and then remained a silent witness in Kayla's firing, posted something on her personal Facebook. "There are laws to follow. Some people should learn their place." The words were like a dagger to the memory of those who had witnessed Kayla being dragged away in front of her colleagues, and it shone even brighter with nearly 80 likes, most of them coming from names within the administrative department, finance, and even management. A colleague commented, "Kids these days think emotions are a license to practice." Tiffany dropped a clapping emoji. Little did she know that post had been immediately screenshot and appeared in the internal bias verification documents folder of Vincent's investigation team. In the West End apartment complex of the city, Jordan Wells, the security guard who had bowed his head when Kayla was fired, was staring at the footage he had just extracted from the underground storage of the camera system. The footage was unremarkable, but the audio was as clear as courtroom recordings. Whitmore, in the administrative office, could be heard loudly speaking to Tiffany. "That little black girl. I've been waiting for a reason to fire her for a long time. She made those poor patients think this is a church. We're not running a church." Jordan sat still in front of the screen. He remembered Kayla's look the morning she was fired. No anger, no hatred, just the quiet pain of someone humiliated by the system they had trusted. He grabbed his phone. He sent the video to an email address he had saved. "Elijah, I have a clip you need to see." Then he typed a separate message, sending it directly to Kayla. "I know an apology won't be enough, but you need to see this video." On the other side of the city, Elijah Reynolds was in his office when he received the email. He opened it. In less than a minute, his curiosity turned into tension. He rewound, listened a second time, a third time. Then he didn't say a word, just forwarded the recording through an encrypted app to Vincent Langston. A minute later, his phone rang. "Is it public yet?" Vincent's voice rang out. "Not yet. I want your confirmation." "Good. Wait for me." Vincent stood up, taking a deep breath. Beneath the calm was a fire beginning to ignite. Now he's just set the bomb under his own feet. Meanwhile, at St. Bradford Hospital, the villain was unaware that he had just exposed his true nature. Tiffany entered the break room, turned on her tablet, still engrossed in responding to supportive comments on social media. She didn't know that all her personal social media records, including internal chat groups, work emails, and private messages, had been backed up and indexed under keywords for racial bias, professional attitude, and abuse of power. Whitmore, in a meeting with the finance department, continued to talk endlessly. "Vincent Langston is a businessman. He won't waste his time with an unknown intern. Let her scream in the streets. The media won't care." A manager nodded quietly, but his eyes glanced at his phone, where a message from an anonymous number had just appeared. "We have the recording. Your name is on the witness list." The manager's face turned pale. He didn't say anything. Within 2 days, more than 17 former employees of St. Bradford began sending information to Vincent's investigation team. They were nurses who had resigned, doctors whose contracts had been terminated, administrative assistants who had been ignored when they blew the whistle. All of them shared one description: they don't need good workers, they need people who stay silent. Disjointed documents began to piece together, and the emerging picture was of a systemically hidden form of discrimination, all concealed under the guise of financial optimization. Kayla, upon receiving the recording from Jordan, sat in silence for a long time. Each word, "that little black girl," rang out like a slap, not because it was offensive, but because it validated everything she had felt but no one had acknowledged. No one there saw her being mistreated. No one believed she was targeted because of her skin color. But now, Whitmore's own voice was the evidence. She messaged Jordan back, "You don't need to apologize, but thank you for daring to record it." In another room, Vincent sat in front of a series of screens, looking at numerous emails and legal reports being categorized and marked. He turned to Reynolds, asking coldly, "Do we have enough?" Reynolds nodded. Not just to sue, but to wipe them out. Vincent pressed his lips together, then said, "Good. It's time to let the world know what's really happening behind the shiny glass doors of St. Bradford." Whitmore's final words before everything came crashing down were not an apology. They weren't an expression of regret. They were a declaration, arrogant to the core. "We've eliminated the disruptive elements. This month's profits are up 15%, and St. Bradford is back on track." In the dim light of the grand ballroom at the Metropolitan Hotel, where the Healthcare Executive of the Year gala was being held, Harold Whitmore raised his champagne glass amid scattered applause. The black bow tie on his white shirt was tied perfectly, and his Italian leather shoes gleamed under the crystal chandeliers hanging like waterfalls from the ceiling. Around him were CEOs, investors, healthcare officials, and, of course, not to be forgotten, Mayor Eric Whitmore, his cousin, who had received millions of dollars in indirect donations from the hospital system through shady channels. Whitmore turned toward the large screen at the center of the room, where the video titled "Honoring St. Bradford's Achievements" was about to play. On the screen, it was still showing images of him cutting ribbons, shaking hands with patients, taking photos with newborn babies, all carefully selected faces. He gently raised his glass, his gaze gleaming with self-satisfaction. "They think a nameless intern could shake an empire." He laughed. "Watch and learn, ladies and gentlemen. This is how a system is run properly." Then, the screen flickered. At first, no one noticed, thinking it was just a signal issue. But when the image of Whitmore shaking hands with the mayor disappeared completely, replaced by a black screen, the room began to fall silent. A moment passed. Then, a sound too clear for anyone to pretend they didn't hear. "That little black girl? I've been waiting for a reason to fire her for a long time." The entire room went silent. On the screen, it wasn't the promotional footage for the gala. It was an internal security camera clip recording Whitmore's own voice, extracted from the hospital's operations room. His face, talking to Tiffany, appeared clearly on the screen. His mocking smile, his smug expression. A click from the system, and the next segment began to play. 312 Black and Latino patients were denied treatment this month. Good job, Tiffany. Every dollar saved is another bonus. The sound of a glass shattering echoed in the room. One guest slowly placed their champagne glass on the table, not taking another sip. Then came a moment of silence, with a large title in the center of the screen: "The Bradford Systemic Discrimination Case." Sponsored by Vincent Langston, CEO, Langston Medical Group. A male voice rang out, deep, clear, and unmistakable. "I am Vincent Langston. On the 15th of this month, I had an accident and was denied treatment at St. Bradford Hospital simply because I didn't have my wallet and lacked insurance at the time. If it weren't for Kayla Thompson, an intern who didn't know me, I would have died. I witnessed blatant discrimination, the encouragement of indifference, and human lives being turned into accounting metrics. The entire room held its breath. Those who had applauded Whitmore earlier were now quietly holding their phones, some beginning to leave the table. From the side door, federal agents in dark suits walked in, badges clearly visible, no longer needing to hide. One of them walked over to Whitmore, speaking in a calm yet chilling tone. "Thomas Harold Whitmore, you are under arrest for systemic discrimination, medical fraud, and abuse of federal funds." The sound of handcuffs snapping onto his wrists rang clearly across the ballroom. Whitmore jerked back. You've been bought. It's her. It's that girl. It's a dirty media trick." But no one responded. All the cameras in the room were trained on him, the man who had once stood at the pinnacle of power, now trembling in the clicks of cameras and the sharp silence of public scrutiny. A voice rang out from the doorway of the gala room. The crowd parted, and in walked Kayla Thompson, dressed in a deep navy suit, accompanied by Vincent Langston and Elijah Reynolds. No one clapped. No one said a word. But all eyes were on her. For in that moment, the girl who had been dragged out of the hospital like someone unworthy of conversation now stood as a symbol that made the entire system kneel. As soon as Kayla Thompson entered the ballroom amidst the soft yellow lighting and thick silence, the surrounding screens continued to display, but this time it was no longer leaked evidence. It was the truth, systematized, methodical, undeniable. The next video played, an excerpt from a meeting 2 months ago. A camera mounted in the finance office captured Whitmore standing in front of a financial report, Tiffany Blake standing beside him, holding a latte. His voice rang out, condescending. 312 black patients? Deny them all. Good job, Tiffany. We can't let the hospital become a charity. The words sliced through the gala room like a knife. No one laughed. No one drank. The faces of everyone, from investors to other hospital CEOs, slowly turned pale. Some of the guest assistants pulled out their phones and began live streaming. The hashtag #BradfordGate started trending on social media within minutes. On the screen, the next charts appeared. A long Excel sheet titled Patient Screening Audit, showing columns for ethnicity and insurance type, with red rejected markings on nearly 90% of rows marked Black or Latino and uninsured or Medicaid. Next was a heat map showing the areas with the highest rate of patient denials, the poorest districts in the city, areas with large immigrant and minority populations. Reynolds, standing next to the projection system, pressed the button. The screen displayed a timeline of cash flow extracted from internal financial reports. March, emergency treatment budget cut. April, $400,000 donation to Mayor Eric Whitmore's re-election campaign. May, rejection rate for uninsured patients increased by 22%. A survey revealed that many patient records had been altered or deleted from the system, with signatures from Whitmore and the finance director. Then, the familiar voice rang out again, calm, powerful. "I am Vincent Langston. I was denied treatment at St. Bradford when I had an accident and didn't have my documents. I was treated like trash. If it weren't for Kayla Thompson, an intern who dared to break the rules to save me, I would have died on that hospital floor. She saved me, not because she knew who I was, but because to her a life is a life. It doesn't need a wallet to be valued." The ballroom went silent. Many in the room began to tear up. Vincent continued, his voice growing firmer. "We have investigated. We have proven. This is not a management mistake. This is policy. This is a system, a model driven by discrimination, corruption, and indifference." The screen transitioned. showing internal emails displayed to the entire audience. Email from Tiffany Blake. If it saves another homeless person, I'll ask Whitmore to get rid of her. Email from the head of legal. No documents, no saving. Every case like this is a financial risk. Email from Whitmore. We're not rejecting patients, we're rejecting costs. Next, the screen showed images of patients who had been denied treatment. An elderly man in a wheelchair, a pregnant woman, a young man with a brain injury. Each face was an accusation. Each tear falling in the video was a sob for the justice that had been delayed too long. The media outside the gala had started to gather. Federal police set up barricades around the hotel. TV channels shifted to live coverage. In less than 30 minutes, Kayla Thompson's name had skyrocketed to the top of the national Twitter trends. Whitmore, now handcuffed, his face pale, was shouting, "This is all made up. You're fabricating this. I'm the one who kept the hospital alive through the COVID crisis. A federal agent interrupted him. You're being recorded. It's best to stay quiet if you don't want to add more charges." The room was no longer bathed in glory. No more laughter, only the shadow of truth now shining directly on those who had once lived in a false light. Vincent turned to Kayla, speaking quietly but loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Now the whole world knows who you are." Kayla didn't smile. She simply held her head high. Because this moment was not about victory. It was about recognition for all those who had been silenced, overlooked, and pushed aside because they weren't valuable enough to be cared for. Amid the clicking of cameras and flashing lights filling the room, all eyes were on an image no politician, CEO, or healthcare sponsor had ever imagined. Harold Whitmore, the man who had once sat atop the pyramid of power in the private healthcare industry, now handcuffed, his face pale, sweat soaking through his high-end dress shirt. Agent Anthony Clark, originally from Harlem, with over 20 years of investigating discrimination and abuse of power within public systems, stepped into the hall. His voice was deep, sharp as steel. "Harold Whitmore, you are under arrest for charges of systemic discrimination, embezzlement of federal health care funds, financial fraud, and abuse of office." Whitmore thrashed about. "I didn't sign anything. This is a smear campaign. She fabricated this with Langston." But Clark didn't care. He gestured to two other agents to escort Whitmore, while a second team moved toward Tiffany Blake, who was now trying to back away toward the emergency exit. As she grabbed the door handle, one agent handed her an urgent summons from the FBI, and from the other side of the room, another hand was raised. Kayla Thompson, in a dark blue suit, walking through the room full of power, now turned into a crumbling stage. Kayla didn't speak. She simply placed the Justice Department sealed envelope into Tiffany's hands. She didn't need to explain. Everyone knew. Tiffany, with her venomous emails and cold attitude, had become an inextricable link in Whitmore's web of corruption. Tiffany opened her mouth, but could only blurt out, "I was just following orders. Clark cut her off. And those orders violated both federal law and professional ethics. Vincent Langston stepped forward, his hand still resting lightly on Kayla's back as a sign of unwavering support. He looked toward the crowd, behind him the screen just having shown a series of damning evidence. His voice rang out without a microphone, but loud enough to make the entire room hold its breath. "I've just signed the official contract. Langston Medical Group has acquired the entire operating system of St. Bradford Hospital, and the effectiveness starts right this second. I declare, from today onward, this facility will be renamed." He looked at Kayla, still standing in disbelief. "The Kayla Thompson Health Center." A wave of silence spread across the room, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was from respect, from admiration. Those who had sat at the VIP tables, who had once raised their glasses with Whitmore, now stood up and began applauding. At first, a few, then the entire room. The applause thundered. There was no music, no confetti, just hands that had once been indifferent, now acknowledging a person who had been deemed unworthy of staying. Whitmore, held tightly in the middle of the room, his face flushed red, screamed, "Who is that little girl to put her name on such a prestigious hospital? What is she? She hasn't even graduated with an official medical degree." Kayla turned around. Her gaze was calm, her voice not raised, but full of weight. "I don't need your recognition. I have hundreds of people who were denied by you, who were ignored by you, and now I am doing what you could never do. I save lives, no selectivity, no conditions." At that moment, the side door opened. A group of people entered. Former patients, residents from Riverside, nurses who had worked at Bradford but had been forced to resign. They carried handmade signs, "Justice for Kayla." Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Vincent raised his hand, inviting them to step onto the stage. They stood behind Kayla like a barrier of truth, people who had no voice in the old system, now becoming living witnesses for the new. The media outside exploded. Live on CNN, MSNBC, headlines appeared, "Breaking, Whitmore arrested, Langston declares new era in healthcare. Former intern Kayla Thompson becomes symbol of reform. From fired to founder, a nurse's legacy begins." As Whitmore was led past the guest seats, he turned his head, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You're not taking me down. You're just lucky." Kayla didn't look back. She only answered, her eyes fixed straight ahead at the podium. "I don't need to bring you down. I'm building something that leaves you with no place to stand." As Whitmore was escorted out of the ballroom with the sound of handcuffs and the flashing lights of the press, and Tiffany Blake bowed her head under the FBI's summons letter, across the city, those who had once been sidelined by the system were beginning to rebuild a place that had once symbolized injustice. And that place now bore a new name, Kayla Thompson Health Center. The new sign was put up the very next morning, as the sun rose above the city skyline. The residents of Riverside, where Kayla had once lived, gathered in front of the gates, not to protest, but to witness a journey of historical reversal. The building that once bore the golden inscription, St. Bradford Hospital, where excellence meets standards, was now replaced with a humble yet proud motto, "Every life matters, without exception." The glass doors were polished to a shine. The halls were carpeted anew. But what had changed wasn't the tiles or the bricks. It was how the people inside operated. At the reception desk, where Tiffany had once sat, selecting patients like a visa officer, now sat a familiar face. Maria Gonzalez, a bilingual nurse who had been fired for being incompatible with the hospital's image. Maria, in her crisp white uniform, greeted everyone who walked through the door with a gentle smile, whether they wore leather shoes or plastic sandals, whether they spoke fluent English or stuttered a few words. Beside her computer, she had taped a handwritten note. "Do not ask for insurance before asking, 'Where does it hurt?'" An elderly woman from Haiti shakily handed over her tattered Medicaid card. Maria gently pushed it back. "Hold on to it. Here, treatment comes first. Paperwork comes later." In the emergency room, there were no more cold orders, no more scrutinizing glances from senior doctors. Instead, Dr. Luis Martinez, who had silently stood by when Kayla was fired, now stood at the center of the room, his white coat adorned with the Director of Emergency Department badge. He hadn't forgotten, and he wouldn't remain silent again. Martinez reorganized the entire intake process. Patients were not asked about insurance until after being clinically examined. Every week there was a community diagnosis event where people could come in for free health checkups. Meanwhile, on the ground floor, in the security operations room, where orders were once given to open the back doors to quickly remove troublemakers, now sat Jordan Wells in his new uniform, with a head of security badge pinned to his left chest. He walked the hospital every morning, not to oversee patients, but to ensure that no one was treated the way Kayla had been. On the wall of his office hung a small frame, a photo of Kayla kneeling beside the nameless man in the emergency video that night. Below the photo was a handwritten quote, "Justice doesn't begin with a verdict. It begins with the right action at the moment no one dares take." Kayla, though celebrated, did not sit in the director's office. She declined the executive position. "I want to be in the hallway, among the people who need me." Instead, she chose to serve as the community health advisor, regularly going down to the intake department to guide nursing interns and patients. She directly trained the new generation, and for the first time in the hospital's history, the nursing internship program had over 60% of students who were Black or Latino. In just 3 months after the name change, Kayla Thompson Health Center had treated over 6,400 uninsured patients, rejecting none. Received $5 million in funding from charitable organizations. Been invited to pilot a non-profit healthcare model for the entire city. And every morning, hundreds of people lined up outside the gates, not because they were forced, but because for the first time in their lives they believed they would be cared for properly. That evening, at the official grand opening, one person stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. Vincent Langston. He looked up at the crowd, not the suited sponsors, but the patients, nurses, doctors, and working-class citizens. And in the front row, sitting honorarily, was Kayla's mother. Invited as a guest of honor, tears welling up in her eyes, her hand trembling as she held a photo of her daughter on graduation day. Vincent spoke. "We haven't just renamed a hospital. We've changed how it views human beings. From a place that once saw lives as burdens on the budget, to a place where every person is called by their name, not by their insurance card number." As the crowd stood to applaud, Maria Gonzalez quietly pulled out her phone, opened a live stream, and pointed the camera toward Kayla, who was standing by the side of the stage. She didn't walk up to the podium, she simply smiled, arms crossed. She didn't need to speak, she didn't need to be filmed, because the whole building was her voice. As the Kayla Thompson Health Center buzzed with patients every day, and as thousands of people who had once been abandoned now found their way back to trust in healthcare in a completely different world, deep inside a federal prison 300 kilometers away from the city, Harold Whitmore sat hunched in his orange prison jumpsuit, holding an old, worn toilet brush, scrubbing the toilets in exchange for a lunch tray with a slice of cold meat. No more neatly pressed white shirts, no more chilled champagne glasses, no more applause at gala events, and above all, no one was calling him Director Whitmore anymore. Whitmore was sentenced to 15 years in prison for charges including systemic discrimination, medical financial fraud, embezzlement of public funds, and obstruction of a federal investigation. In the first 6 months in prison, he lived almost like a shadow, his eyes vacant, his mouth mumbling meaningless words, as though trying to cling to the last remnants of a time when he held power. But with each passing day, everything he once took pride in began to disintegrate. His wife, who had always stood by his side at every ceremony, filed for divorce just 2 weeks after the sentencing. His 2 children, one in college, the other about to enter high school, sent requests to change their last name, cutting all ties. His bank accounts were frozen, his shares revoked, and the political friends who once called him the architect of modern healthcare fell silent, as though he had never existed. That morning, Whitmore was tidying up the laundry room in the prison, where the well-behaved inmates were allowed to work in exchange for reduced sentences. His vision blurred from the steam rising from the dryers, his hands shaking as he lifted a heavy bag of laundry. A guard approached and coldly said, "You have a visitor." Whitmore froze. It had been a long time since anyone had visited. He wiped his hands on his shirt, took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. But when he entered the visitation room and saw who was waiting on the other side of the glass, his heart sank. Jordan Wells. Jordan wore a simple gray shirt, no security badge or handcuffs. But his demeanor was solid, his eyes bright, and he was a world apart from the security staff who had once bowed their heads in front of Whitmore at St. Bradford. On the table was a thin white envelope, embossed with silver lettering. Official renaming ceremony, Kayla Thompson Health Center. Whitmore squinted, his tone sharp. "You came to mock me?" Jordan shook his head slowly and pushed the envelope toward him. "Number I came to do what you never could, treat a human being with respect." Whitmore sneered. "Respect? For me? After all this?" Jordan leaned back, speaking softly. "I'm not here for you, I'm here for Kayla." Whitmore hesitated. "She wants you to have one chance, just once, to see what you once deemed meaningless. A healthcare center that doesn't ask for insurance before saving a life. A place run by those you once excluded from the system. And now, they're saving the lives you left behind." Whitmore opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation to the grand opening, along with a large printed photo. Kayla standing next to Vincent Langston. Behind them, hundreds of residents, nurses, doctors, and patients who had been denied treatment, all holding up signs, "We are the system now." Beneath the photo was a bolded quote, "Doing what's right, no matter how small, always makes a bigger impact than any title." Kayla Thompson. Whitmore held the photo slowly, his lips pressed tightly together. It wasn't anger. It was, for the first time in many months, shame. Jordan stood up. Before leaving the visitation room, he turned back. "You thought you built an empire. But it turns out you handed Kayla the fire to burn down that decaying empire. There's one thing, though. She didn't destroy it out of revenge. She rebuilt it. To heal." The visitation room door closed, leaving Whitmore sitting alone, still holding the photo. He looked at the faces of everyone in the picture, searching but unable to find any of the important people who had once surrounded him. Only faces that had once been invisible. And now, they had rewritten the story he once believed was his. While Whitmore sat alone amidst the gray brick walls and cold fluorescent lights, turning a photo that marked an era that had changed colors, hundreds of miles away, in the main hall of the National Conference Center in Washington, D.C., Kayla Thompson stepped onto the stage, with thousands of eyes awaiting her. She was no longer the young girl in a practice blouse with hands stained from a fateful night. On that stage today, Kayla wore an elegant white suit with subtle silver trimming, a small heart-shaped emblem on her collar, and a stethoscope intertwined, symbolizing the new, humane healthcare system she had helped build. Behind her, the backdrop carried no extravagant lines. Just 3 words: compassion, courage, change. Kayla stood still for a few seconds before the podium, silently gazing at the room full of representatives from over 40 leading hospitals, medical schools, hundreds of medical students, nurses, and patients who had once been denied treatment, now guests of honor. Then she spoke, her voice low but resonant, without a prepared script in hand. I used to think that being fired was the end, but it turned out it was the beginning. The entire hall went silent. I was kicked out of the hospital not because I did something wrong, but because I did something right. I saved a person whom the system deemed unworthy of saving. And today, I am here to make one thing clear. Never again. Never again will a nurse, doctor, or healthcare worker have to choose between their conscience and their job. Never again will a patient be turned away because they lack insurance or because they have the wrong skin color. The first round of applause came from an elderly woman in the front row, who had once been treated for free at the center after almost dying from low blood pressure but was denied medical care elsewhere. Then the whole auditorium stood, but Kayla raised her hand gently to signal that she was not done. I cannot change an entire country, but I can plant a seed, and the first seed is all of you, medical students, those who were once turned away from school because of the wrong zip code, the wrong last name, or because you didn't look like a doctor. So today, I officially announce the Kayla Thompson Scholarship Fund, dedicated to medical students of color, Latinx, and immigrants, those who carry strength and compassion but were once rejected because of their circumstances. The screen behind her displayed the logo of the Scholarship Fund, a hand cradling a red heart with the words, "Every hand can heal." No one will be stopped from learning medicine just because they're poor. No one will be forbidden from saving lives because of where they were born. This round of applause was deafening. A few young students in the back row were in tears. A Somali girl, wearing her student lab coat, whispered to her friend, "She's like my sister, like me. Now we have a place to go." After the speech, Vincent Langston, who had always been quietly standing behind her, stepped onto the stage. He couldn't hide his pride in his eyes. His voice was firm, declaring to the entire media, Langston Medical Group is committing an additional $100 million to expand the Kayla Thompson Health Center model to 5 major cities, including Chicago, Detroit, Houston, Oakland, and New Orleans. We will build nonprofit medical centers with no financial barriers, no racial biases, and no ethical compromises. The sound of camera shutters filled the air. Major news outlets broke the story during the live broadcast. Langston makes the largest investment in the history of private health care to eliminate discrimination. Kayla Thompson becomes a national symbol for humane health care reform. After the ceremony, Kayla was invited to major TV networks, and prestigious universities vied to invite her as a guest lecturer. But she accepted only one invitation: to lead a medical ethics training program for first-year medical students at Riverside Community College, the place she had almost not been accepted to. I want to start from where I was once deemed not good enough. And from that day forward, every lecture Kayla gave began with a familiar sentence. I'm not here to teach you how to heal. I'm here to remind you that the person on the operating table is not a clinical case. They are a human being. 6 months after the speech in Washington, D.C., the story of Kayla Thompson was no longer just a media phenomenon or a topic on political talk shows. It had become an official chapter in the medical ethics curriculum at over 200 universities across the United States. From an intern publicly humiliated and kicked out of the hospital like a traitor to the system, Kayla was now a living symbol of healthcare justice. Not because she fought against power, but because she built a new model that rendered the old power obsolete. The Kayla Model curriculum, named after the globally trending hashtag number model Kayla, is now officially applied at many medical institutions. Students are taught not only how to use a stethoscope, but also how to listen with their hearts. Harvard Medical School and Johns Hopkins invited Kayla to lecture on modern medical ethics. Stanford University erected a memorial statue titled The Unconditional Life-Saving Hand, inspired by the image of Kayla in the emergency video That Fateful Night. In Nigeria, Brazil, and India, community healthcare centers began to model the non-profit system that she helped create. At the WHO headquarters, she was invited to speak at the World Forum on Equality in Healthcare Access, becoming the youngest person ever to do so. On social media, the hashtag number model Kayla surpassed 80 million mentions within a year, appearing in charity campaigns, university essays, on protest signs, and even on nurse uniforms in remote areas. A nurse in Kenya posted, "I once thought I didn't deserve this profession because of my poor background, but then I learned about Kayla." A doctor of Colombian descent wrote, "I teach my students that strength isn't in the hospital you work in, but in the person you save." A 10th grade student in the Bronx wrote in their college essay, "I want to study medicine to be like Kayla Thompson, not to wear a white coat, but to be worthy of it." At the Global Citizen of the Year Awards at the United Nations headquarters, Kayla stepped onto the stage to receive the title. Unlike all the other prestigious guests, she didn't bring a prepared speech. She simply walked up to the microphone, holding a photo of her mother, who had died due to lack of insurance. She spoke slowly. "I once thought being fired was the end, but it turns out that was just a period in a bigger story. A story I had to rewrite because the old system was wrong from the first page. I was humiliated for doing what was right, but that didn't shrink me. It forced me to grow, bigger than those who thought they could forever control who lives and who gets cast aside." She paused, looking directly into the live broadcast camera. "I didn't come here to be celebrated. I came to remind everyone that revenge is easy, but it only creates blamers. Building something so great will make evil have no place to exist. And that is what I choose." Below, many people stood up. Among them was Maria Gonzalez, now the Human Resources Director of the entire Kayla Thompson Health Network. Jordan Wells, the man who once bowed his head when she was kicked out of the hospital, now leading the humanitarian security campaign for 7 centers. And Dr. Martinez, who had remained silent in fear, now a speaker at numerous global medical ethics conferences. The story ended like a perfect cycle, but not with satisfaction, with inheritance, because every medical student stepping into their first class now hears a familiar sentence printed on the white walls of the lecture hall. Don't take revenge with anger. Build something so great that evil has no place to exist. Kayla Thompson. The story of Kayla Thompson is not just the journey of an intern wrongfully fired, but a reminder that even in the most ruthless systems, compassion and justice can still prevail. From a person dragged out of a hospital as a rule breaker, Kayla became an international symbol for justice, medical ethics, and innovation. Not because she sought revenge, but because she chose to build something so great that evil became meaningless. If you have ever been underestimated, hurt for daring to stand up for what's right, are you ready to turn your pain into strength like Kayla did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like, share this video with those who need inspiration, and subscribe to the channel to not miss real stories about justice, resilience, and hope. Because sometimes just one person doing what's right is enough to change an entire system.